When I wanted to go back to the coast, I realized there was a strong current. The current was taking me away from the island. The situation was horrible. I was scared and thought I would die in the open sea. I didn't have enough food and water for a long journey. I fought very hard against the current for 2 hours. Finally, I managed to get close to my island. Now I could continue my trip around the island. I knew I was stronger than the currents, and that made me feel good. Soon I found a small river that went further inside the island, but I got nowhere because soon the river was very narrow and stones blocked the way. I couldn't continue. I got off my canoe and went to explore this part of the island. It wasn't far from the part of the island I knew. I even found the way to my house in the valley. I was so tired from the trip that I fell asleep. I was woken up by a voice. The voice was saying, "Robinson, where are you?" Robinson, where are you? I was scared at first, but then I saw my parrot, Pole, on top of the hedge. He learned the phrases I repeated to myself so many times. Now he was saying them with the same intonation I used. I was surprised to find the parrot here because I left it in my house. Still, I was happy to hear someone talk to me. I left the canoe there and returned home with the parrot. I didn't take such long trips for a year, and I was staying in my house most of the time. I kept on making wooden tools and clay pots. I even found a way to make pots with a wheel, which made my work much lighter. I also figured out how to make a tobacco pipe, which I missed a lot ever since I came to this island. Chapter 18. Food. One day, I also noticed I was running out of gunpowder. I was worried I wouldn't be able to kill any more goats once it was gone. The kid I once caught was old, and it was too late to try to find a male for her. I wanted meat, but I didn't have the heart to kill her. One day, she died a natural death. It was 11 years since I first came to this island, and all this time I was using gunpowder to provide myself with meat. Now I thought of finding some other way to supply myself with food. I decided to make some traps. I didn't succeed at first, but eventually I caught 3 young goats, 1 male and 2 females. I took them home with me. I had to make a fence for them because I feared they might run away with the wild ones once they were adults. It took me 3 months, but I made a nice fence around a suitable space where there was a lot of grass and water for them. After some time, the young goats became very calm, and they were eating out of my hand. In 2 years I had a dozen goats, and in 3 years' time I had more than 20 goats. This way I had a lot of milk and meat. I experimented several times, and at last I managed to make cheese and butter. My table was full now, and I was surrounded by animals. My old dog, cats, goats, and Pole, my parrot. The only thing I still missed was someone to talk to. One day I set out to reach that part of the island where the strong current was. On the way there, I thought to myself how ridiculous I would have appeared if some Englishman saw me. I had a big hat, a short jacket, and short trousers, all made out of goat skin. I didn't have socks or shoes, but I put some goat skin around my feet. I had 2 belts, one for the gun and knife and one for the gunpowder. On my back I had a basket, and I also carried a gun on my shoulder and an umbrella made out of goat skin above my head. My beard was pretty long, and I realized I was looking very unusual compared to how I used to look years ago. One day, around lunchtime, I was walking on the beach to check on my canoe when I came across something surprising. I saw the mark of a human footprint in the sand. I looked around, but I couldn't see anyone. I was scared and hurried back to my home. I was so frightened that I couldn't sleep that night. Why was there no canoe? Why were there no more footprints? I thought that maybe it was the footprint of one of the people who probably inhabited the islands around. I began to worry whether they saw my canoe and were now preparing to attack me. Then I convinced myself that maybe I saw the mark of my own foot, and I was a fool to get scared by it. This realization made me feel better. I took my courage and went to see the footprint again. Chapter 19. Cannibals. When I approached the footprint, I saw that the footprint was much bigger than the size of my foot. It was impossible that the footprint was mine. I got scared again. That night I considered letting all my animals into the wild, destroying my fields and my summer house so that no mark of human habitation was left on the island. I was so afraid that I couldn't fall asleep the whole night. In the morning, I finally fell asleep for a short time. When I woke up, my head was clear. Now it didn't seem that strange that people lived on the islands around. Maybe they came to my island from time to time, or now the wind carried them this way. For the first time, I remembered that for the 15 years I lived on the island, I didn't meet any human being or discover any signs of a settlement here. This calmed me down. Still, I wanted to be safe. I made another wall around my house and left holes through which I could easily fire several guns if attacked. Now I had such a strongly protected house, surrounded by walls and thick trees, that no one could come near me. I was also worried about my goats. I divided the animals and built a smaller fence in another part of the island. It took me a lot of time and effort, but in the end, my animals were safe from any unexpected attack. It was the 16th year of my life on the island when something very sad happened. My dog died. I was crying for 3 days. It was my worst day on the island. I went to my goats and told them how sad I was. They didn't understand my words, but I felt they understood me. They felt my emotions. They were unusually calm and quiet. It was now 2 years after the footprint on the beach. One day, as I was walking towards the beach, I thought I saw a canoe in the distance. I couldn't be sure, so I just continued my walk. It was then that I came across something terrifying. The whole beach was covered with human remains. Skulls, hands, and feet were all over the place, and there was a black circle from a fire. I was angry and scared at the same time. They were here again. I thought I was sick and threw up at the horrible sight. I went back to my house and again considered what to do. I decided to give up going out to sea with my canoe because the cannibals could capture me. I also stopped firing guns because I feared being discovered by the sound. Every time I went out of my house, I carried guns to protect myself in case of a sudden attack. Soon I started thinking about how I could kill some of the cannibals and save their victims if I could. If that wasn't possible, at least I could frighten them, so they would never come here again. I began looking at that side of the island where I first saw the human footprint. I wanted to find a hiding place for myself and prepare it for the attack. Then I changed my mind and thought it was unreasonable to fight them because they hadn't done any harm to me. Chapter 20. Cave. Eventually, I gave up the preparations altogether and decided to act only if they attacked me first. For a whole year, I was hiding my activities as well as I could. I hid my canoe, kept myself occupied with my animals and fields, but I was very careful. I was afraid to make loud noises and was worried every time I made a fire. But I needed fire because I needed to cook. So when I made a fire, I tried to make as little smoke as possible. Smoke could go very high and be seen from a distance. Once, when I was cutting some branches in the forest, I discovered a small cave. I went inside. But as soon as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I noticed two bright eyes looking at me. I jumped outside, scared to death. I waited, but nothing happened. I went slowly to the entrance of the cave and listened. I heard something. It sounded as if there was somebody injured inside. I took my gun and entered the cave slowly. When my eyes could see again, I discovered an old goat. It was dying in the cave. I returned to the cave the next day to find out that the goat was dead. I explored the place and found it very safe. It would make a great hiding place near the beach. That's why I brought some of my guns and some gunpowder there. 23 years passed since I first stepped on this island. Now I was living comfortably and had many animals to keep me company. Pole was repeating my name very pleasantly. I had 2 more parrots, and I taught all of them to pronounce my name. It was the last month of my 23rd year on the island when, as I was walking to my fields early one morning, I saw fire on the beach. I immediately returned to my house and loaded all my guns. I took my telescope and went close to the beach. I hid myself and observed them. I saw 9 naked people who came in 2 canoes. It seemed that they were waiting for the high tide to leave the island. As soon as they left, I went to the beach. It was full of blood and bones again. This made me sick and angry, and I decided to kill as many of them as I could the next time I saw them. They didn't return for a long time. Meanwhile, something else happened that disturbed my routine. One evening, I was disturbed out of my ordinary activities by the sound of a gun at sea. I got out of my house and saw a flash coming from the sea. A second shot followed. I thought it was coming from some ship in danger asking for help. I took all the dry wood I could find around and ran to the beach where I made a big fire. They probably saw the fire because they fired again. I thought, I will speak to somebody tonight. This is great. I kept the fire until midnight, but there was no sign of them. It was strange. something my brain couldn't understand. Maybe in the morning I would know more, I thought. Chapter 21. Visitors. The next morning I saw the ship. The ship stopped far from the beach. It looked empty. I didn't understand it. I expected the people who fired the gun yesterday. I really wanted to communicate with somebody. I missed communication with real people very much. I took my canoe and decided to go to the ship to see if there was anybody still alive on board. The ship looked Spanish, and it was completely destroyed. When I got closer, I saw a dog. He was very happy to see me. I gave him bread and water. He was hungry and extremely thirsty. I found nobody on the ship. What happened to the men from the ship? I thought it was very strange. I didn't have an answer to this question. It was a mystery. There were many boxes with different things on the ship. Some boxes were small, some boxes were big. Many of the big boxes had bottles with alcohol in them, but these boxes were too heavy. I couldn't take them on the canoe. I found guns and gunpowder, and I took them to the canoe. I also found some other useful things. I returned to the island in the evening with several small boxes on my canoe. I had some new shirts and also gold, silver, and a lot of gunpowder. Gunpowder was important to me on the island. It was more valuable than any money or precious metals. There was something else I needed very much. Shoes. I found 2 pairs of shoes on board the ship, and I took them with me. I put all my new things in the cave. I made 5 trips to the ship, taking everything useful for me. Then I hid the canoe again and went back to my house. Everything went back to normal. Time went quickly. I often thought about the men from the ship and the cannibals on the beach. These thoughts were always in the back of my mind, day and night. It was one night in March when I dreamed that 2 canoes with cannibals landed on the beach. One of their victims ran away and came to my house where I saved him. Then we became friends, and he helped me navigate out of the dangerous currents around the island. I woke up, but the dream stayed in my mind. I realized that if I had somebody to help me, I might be able to escape from the island and reach the continent. Maybe I could save one of the victims brought to this island. I decided to look out for the cannibals, and for the next 1.5 years, I went daily around the beach, hoping to see canoes. This finally happened one morning. I saw 5 canoes with more than 30 men on the beach. I couldn't attack them because they were too many, so I just waited. I was observing them through my telescope. They made a fire and danced around it. I also saw 2 men, the victims tied together. The 2 tied men were taken to the fire. After a while, one was beaten and killed. The cannibals painted their bodies with his blood. It was like a theater, but this wasn't a theater. It was real. It was horrible, but I couldn't do anything. There were too many cannibals. The second man waited on the side. When the cannibals didn't look, the second man jumped up and started to run away. He was running in my direction. I ran to the beach and hid behind a tree. I saw that he was followed only by 2 cannibals. This was the right moment to save the prisoner. The man ran as fast as possible, but the cannibals were closer and closer to him. Their speed was faster than his. Chapter 22. Friday. I prepared 2 guns and waited behind the tree. The prisoner ran directly to my tree but still didn't see me. I didn't move. Then he ran around me. I was still hidden behind the tree when the first cannibal ran close to me. I jumped from behind the tree. He was shocked. I shot him. The second cannibal saw this. He tried to shoot an arrow at me. I had to shoot him too. The prisoner stopped when he heard the shots and turned. He was scared. I smiled at him and showed him that it was okay to come closer. He came to me, went down to his knees, put his head on the ground, and then took my foot and put my foot on his head. I showed him to stand up. He stood up and looked at the dead cannibals. He went to their bodies and looked at the holes in their bodies. He probably couldn't understand what happened to the cannibals. It was unbelievable to him. He took the arrows from the dead men. We hid the bodies in the forest and then went deeper into the forest. I took the man to my cave. The cave was my secret. Nobody could find us there. I gave him bread, meat, and some water. He was so tired that he fell asleep almost immediately. I had an opportunity to look at him. I could see he was young, slim, but very strong. I thought he was about 25 years old. He had long black hair, dark skin, and a pleasant face. I let him sleep and went outside. I stayed near the cave and watched for the cannibals, but they didn't look for us. 3 hours later, the man came out of the cave. He showed me how happy he was that he was alive and safe. I started speaking to him. I named him Friday because it was Friday when I saved his life. I told him my name and taught him yes and no. We stayed in the cave that night. The next day, we went on top of the hill. I saw through my telescope that the canoes were gone. We were alone on the island. We went carefully to the beach. First, we went to the place where we hid the bodies of the dead cannibals. When we found them, Friday wanted to eat them. I was angry and showed him that it wasn't good to eat them here. I understood that Friday was also a cannibal. We buried the cannibals, then we walked to the beach. What we saw was horrible. There were human bones all around, and the sand was red with blood. I asked Friday to collect all the body parts. I prepared a big fire. I decided to burn the body parts in the fire. We went to my house, where I made a little tent for Friday between the 2 fences around my house. I took all his weapons away. I wanted to feel safe. After a while, I realized this wasn't necessary at all because Friday was a very faithful and honest man. He was like a child to me, and I was like a father to him. On many occasions later, he showed me he would sacrifice his life to save mine. I was very happy to have Friday around, and I began teaching him everything he needed to know about life, like a European. First, I taught him some new words. I started with hi, hello, bye, and thank you. It wasn't easy at the beginning, but I was patient because I was happy I could speak to somebody. Chapter 23. Conversation. 2 days later, I shot a young goat. Friday was scared of the gun. He didn't understand how such a small thing could kill a goat. He didn't want to touch the gun. Later, I saw how he talked to the gun. He probably asked the gun not to kill him. We took the goat and made a nice soup. Before the soup was finished, Friday went to the forest and brought some herbs. He put them into the soup. The herbs were similar to pepper. The soup smelled fantastic, and it tasted fantastic too. We cooked some of the goat meat the next day with sauce. Again, Friday brought some herbs and plants. The herbs made the sauce taste great. They made a big difference, and we made a nice salad from the plants. I taught Friday how to prepare corn and bake bread out of it, and in a few days he could do it as well as I could. Then we started expanding my garden, and he helped me plant more corn. In all activities, Friday was of great help. He was also very good at catching fish. Our cooperation was simply great. We were a good team. I wanted to teach Friday to speak English very well. I wanted to teach him English as fast as possible. I took my role very seriously. I thought about the best method to teach him English. When I spoke to him fast and used all the words and grammar, he didn't understand me, so I tried to speak mainly in the present and used simple words. I also said only short sentences. This way, Friday understood more. We spoke about many topics. When Friday didn't understand something, I pointed at it or tried to explain the word to him. If it didn't help, I made a picture of the thing in the sand. Soon, Friday started to understand many of my sentences in the present. He also started to use some words. His pronunciation was very bad at the beginning, but it wasn't important for me. I understood him, and I was very happy that somebody spoke to me. Friday was a good student. He was clever and improved quickly. Soon he could say some words like an Englishman. Of course, not all the words, but the words he said correctly made me very happy. I could see that Friday very often repeated aloud what I said. I thought that it also helped him to learn so fast. I thought learning a language is quite easy. You only need to copy what you hear, and if you don't understand something, you need a picture of it. Then you need a lot of practice. This is the best system. Friday's progress was fast. He was able to talk more and more every day. In a couple of months, we could have a basic, simple conversation. Friday liked my tools. They were very interesting for him. He especially liked the telescope. He borrowed the telescope very often. Often he went to one of the hills and watched everything around. Once I asked him about his people and how he became a prisoner. He told me that they ate human meat like their opponents. In fact, in the past, he did a ritual on the other side of my island. He was probably one of the cannibals I saw a long time ago. He told me about the sea and the currents in the sea. Thanks to Friday, I learned about the history, culture, and traditions of his people. I also told him my personal story and described England and Europe to him. Chapter 24. Knife. I told Friday about our cities, schools, ships, and traveling around the world. I told him that education is important in Europe and that we study from books. It was all new to him. Friday's people didn't need schools on the islands. They had all they needed for their life. When I felt I could trust him enough, I showed him how gunpowder worked. I taught him how to use a gun. I gave him a knife and a belt. He was happy with my presence. He said that he saw a similar knife before. I asked him to tell me more. He explained that his people saved white men from a small boat and that they still lived with them. He counted 17 Europeans who lived with his people. I thought these might be the sailors from the ship that came to my island some time ago. They probably saved themselves in a boat because I didn't find anybody when I went on board to look for survivors. I asked Friday to tell me more about them. He told me that they were okay. I was happy to hear that some Europeans lived not very far from my island. I started to plan how to meet them. The next day, we went on a small trip around the island. First, we went to the cross, where I wanted to mark another day. "What is it?" asked Friday when we came to the cross. I explained that we have 7 days in a week. When Friday heard the word Friday, he laughed. I explained to him that I saved him on Friday. That's why I called him Friday. Now he fully understood the meaning of his name. During the walk, Friday told me if we built a canoe and went to my island, he would tell my people how I saved his life. I took Friday to the other side of the island and showed him my canoe there, but he said this canoe is too small for 2 people. We should make a bigger canoe. Soon we started building the canoe we needed. We chose and cut a big tree, and I showed him how to cut the inside to form a canoe. It took us a month to do this, and 2 days more to drag it to the beach. The canoe was ready, and we were ready too. The day before we wanted to go, Friday went to the beach. He came back very quickly and looked very scared. Before I asked him what happened, he said that there were 3 canoes on the beach. He was scared because he thought the cannibals had returned to look for him. He said there is a war between 2 groups of local people. We are neighbors, but we don't like each other. We had many conflicts in the past. There was never peace. We kill each other whenever we can. When they see me, they will kill me. I told him, don't worry. We are strong, and maybe they didn't come for you today. We will see. We took 15 guns and went on top of a hill. We saw 14 cannibals, 2 prisoners, and 3 canoes on the beach. They stopped close to the place where the forest was near the beach. This made it easier to attack them and save the prisoners. We approached them quietly through the forest while we were walking. I was considering my right to kill them. Maybe I had no reason to shoot so many people who didn't do any bad to me. After some thinking, I decided only to watch and attack them only if it was necessary. Here's your text with added punctuation. Chapter 25. Father, when we were very close to the beach, we saw that the cannibals were around the fire. They started to eat the first of their prisoners. The second prisoner was still alive. He wasn't one of Friday's people. people, he was European. The cannibals wanted to eat him too. I decided to save him if it was possible. We moved closer to the place where the cannibals were gathered. The cannibals were still around the fire, but two went for the white man. When I saw this, I loaded the guns and asked Friday to do exactly what I did. We fired quickly at the cannibals from 6 guns. We killed 3 and injured 2 of the cannibals. The rest jumped up to their feet, but didn't know which way to run because they didn't know from which direction the danger was coming. Some of them ran to their canoes, some of them stayed on the beach. We continued. Shooting, we shot 3 other cannibals. After that, we took our guns and we ran to the beach. We shouted very loudly. I ran to the prisoner and Friday shot the nearest cannibal. I freed the European. He said something in Spanish to me. I gave him a gun. He was weak, but he could shoot if some cannibal attacked him. The cannibals were shocked by our sudden attack. Our unusual guns scared them a lot. Only 2 cannibals tried to fight us. We shot them with our guns. Friday fought very well. He quickly killed 1 cannibal who was injured. The second injured cannibal ran into the forest. Friday ran after him and he killed him with his knife. Only 3 cannibals were able to run away. They jumped into their canoe and started to leave. Friday shot at them, but he didn't hit them. It was dangerous to let them go because they could tell their people about us. Friday and I wanted to jump in one of their canoes to chase them. But to our surprise, we found another tied person on the bottom. He was scared because he didn't see the fight, but only heard it. The ropes were so tight around his neck that he was going to die soon if I didn't cut them.